Hey folks, my name is Alex, and in this video we're going to work on the UpdateEmployee function and use Prisma to update records in our database. Let's jump into it. First thing that we'll need to do is scaffold the function using the Azure Functions CLI. So on a new terminal window, ensure that you're in the API directory and create a new function using the funcNew command with the name UpdateEmployee using the HTTP trigger template and an anonymous auth level. The CLI creates a new folder called UpdateEmployee with two files, a function.json file, that's the configuration for the function, and an index.js that will contain the logic for the function. Next, open the function.json file and make a couple of adjustments. Update the default method to put, and then add a route property right after the methods to point the function to employees, and then add an ID request parameter to it. And finally, update the names property from res to $return. Next, navigate to the index.js file and clear the default content inside the function. Now, before we write any code, let's add some pseudocode in form of comments to guide us in the implementation. We know that the function will receive an ID for updating the employee in the request parameters, and the name, job role, salary, and employee registration values will be extracted from the request's body. We'll also add a check to ensure that the employee record with the ID from the request parameter exists, and if the employee exists, we'll go ahead and update the record in the database. Next, we'll import the Prisma and Error utilities from the shared folder and add them to the top of the file, which we'll use in just a moment. And then inside the exported function, we'll add a try-catch statement with the function's logic, like the checks and the database query, being handled inside the try, and any uncaught errors will be taken care of in the catch. Next, we'll destructure the ID from the request parameters, and also destructure the name, job role, salary, and employee registration from the request body. And then we'll add a query to first check if an employee exists in our database using the ID from the request parameters. And we'll use the employee.findUnique method from Prisma, add curly brackets inside it, and create a filter using the where property, which I'll pass in the ID from the request params. If the employee doesn't exist, we'll use the handle error utility to return a status code of 404 and an error message stating that the employee wasn't found. If the employee exists, we'll update the record using the employee.update method from Prisma, providing a where property, that's our filter, and we'll also provide the ID from the request parameters here. We'll also add a data property, that's also an object, and then pass the values from the request body inside it. In the event any of the values from the request body will be missing, we wouldn't want to update any of the values of the employee record. To do this, we'll add an OR operator next to the property and add an undefined. Once the query is done executing, we'll return a status code of 200 and the employee record that was updated in the responses body. And finally, if the function runs into an uncaught exception, we'll log a generic message here and also log the error and return a status code of 500 and the error inside the response using the handle error function. Let's now start the functions locally to test out the update employee. Open your terminal and start the server using the func start command. And you should see the update employee function successfully running. In my working directory, I have an api.http file that contains a sample put request to the employee's route with an ID value, which you can confirm using the getEmployee function over here, and also a sample request body with the name, job role, and salary in JSON format. So I'll go ahead and send the request, and the function returns the updated employee and a status code of 200. And finally, let's head over to the Azure SQL Query Editor and confirm that the data was successfully persisted. And if you click Run, we should see the value of the employee record that was successfully updated in the Results tab. So let's recap what we covered in this video. We first created an UpdateEmployee function in which we added a query to check whether an employee exists by their ID before making an update to the record. And if the employee existed, the record would be updated in the database. We also added some error handling to our function to take care of any uncaught exceptions. And after that, we tested out the function using the REST client VS Code extension. and then finally query the data using the Azure SQL Query Editor. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.